Hello, I'm Dane, and welcome to another episode of Dax Jutsu. If this is your first time coming here, thank you for visiting. And to my frequent visitors, thank you as well. In today's episode, we will discuss something that's been long overdue from my end, and that is how to create a dynamic accounts receivable aging schedule in Power BI. Why dynamic? Dynamic because the invoice change, the age of an invoice changes with this in response to a slicer selection. And so you can go back in time to determine how old an invoice is and whether you might want to write it off or not. Okay, so let's inspect our data. By the way, this data was created in Power Query using random numbers, so they might not make sense. But overall, the logic and the concept should be very usable. So for credit sales, we have around 4.17 million rows. And for payments, we have 7.33 million rows. So why does payments table have more rows than credit sales? In business, we don't really pay everything in lump sum one time. We usually pay it in installment, right? And that's why payments table have more or has more rows than credit sales. And then we have our dates table, but you cannot, this is created using DAX, but you can create one using M. That's actually preferable. And we have our customers table. Well, customers table, the customer names here was created using Chat GPT. So let's go to our relationships. So customer number to customer number in credit sales, and we don't relate that to payments. Credit sales by invoice number will relate that to invoice number in payments because sometimes we want to see the breakdown of the invoice number. I mean, how the payments related to the invoice number. And we have the dates table related to transaction date in credit sales using an active relationship and an active relationship to payment date and payments table. And I'll discuss later why we're using an inactive relationship. So let's go to our measures. So credit sales. Credit sales. Credit sales very simple. That's simply the sum of sales on credit from credit sales table. And then for payments, we do have two measures. Payments. One is a simple sum of payment amount, and the other one uses use relationship to invoke um, the inactive relationship between date from dates table and payment date. And these are our transactions. As you can see, payments with and without use relationship returns different results. For example, for payments that is non-use relationship, total payment related to invoices which has or which have a transaction date of July 1, 2020 is 144K. But this 144K was not paid in July on July 1, 2020. Thus, we need to use um, this measure, payment use relationship. So on July 11, 2020, we had a payment of $266 or peso, whatever the currency is. So we had a payment of 266, and that could be coming from any of the invoices from the prior dates or from the current road date. So amount due is simply the running balance or the cumulative sum of credit sales plus payments up to the current road date. So that means for July 1, 2020, that's 143K, and then we add 273K credit sales in July 2, 2020. So our running balance is now 416K. And on July 11, we subtract the payment from the sum of amount due as of July 10 plus credit sales from July 11. And we go to our age table or aging table. This one, the age table, was created using DAX. So we start with our max. So the max number to be used in generate series is simply today's date minus minimum transaction date plus 1. Why today's date? Is because my data set is up to today's date. That's how I made it in Power Query. And then we use generate series to create a series of numbers. Generate series creates a table of numbers, but the default column name is value. The value. That's why we use select columns to change the name of value column. So we select value column from generate series and name that as age. And then we add one more column as for our age category. So age category is simply if age from our base variable, which is this, is less than or equal 30, then 0 to 30 days. If less than or equal to 60, 31 to 60 days, it's because for the first 30, for ages 0 to 30, this logic is applied and then followed by this logic, and so on and so forth. And then we have our invoice date or invoice age. Invoice age. So invoice age is simply date diff of our transaction date versus as of date, and the interval is day. So if I were to write this differently, that would be as of date minus selected. So that would be as of date minus this, which will return the same result. It's just that date diff gives you an option to select an interval. So I could select week, month, but in this case, day is what we need. And okay. So what is as of date? As of date is the max dates in the current context. So as of date now is 2/13/2023. That is our max date. And by the way, I use before slicer before. The reason is if I use something like a drop down, then the values will still be correct, but we won't be able to, I mean, the breakdown will be different. Because what we will see is just the invoices for 2/13/23 and not the prior dates invoices. So how did I bucketize this? What did I do? So amount due by age, that's the measure I use. Amount due by age. So amount due by age. Well, actually, I use a different measure initially. So my original measure was this. But after testing which one is a lot faster using DAX Studio, I decided to use this one. Why is this faster? It's because invoice age in this measure is calculated just once for every transaction date. And then it's stored in at invoice age virtual column, thus avoiding redundant recalculation of invoice age. Unlike with this one, invoice age is recalculated for each distinct transaction date. With this one, we calculate everything once. We store that in a virtual column, and then use filter. Yeah, yes, use filter to filter the invoice age. And invoice age should be within our age values variable, which returns a table. So age values is dynamic. It will depend on the groupings we had or the age category. So for example, for 0 to 30 days, we only select invoice ages that are from 0 to 30. And so amount due is filtered according to what the invoice age selected or invoice age that are in age values. Okay, so that's how you calculate amount due by age. Now I had a problem. Yes, I had a problem with this setup. There is no problem if there's not much problem if we are calculating we are rendering amount due measure at the customer level still pretty fast given the 4.3 million and 7.3 million rows of data we have. However, if I expand this, it really takes a lot of time for the visual to render. See, and that's how long it takes. Really slow. So I had to figure out what was wrong. And so when I opened Task Studio, I realized that conditional formatting also part of what's in the Dask query. Now it's loaded. It's still slow. And so I removed conditional formatting. Yep. This is the version that doesn't have conditional formatting. And and let's see. It's faster. And how many invoices are we talking about? So we have 3021 invoices, around 3 grand of invoices. And it's a lot faster than having a visual that has conditional formatting. So that is something that you need to consider when you develop reports. Aesthetic wise, it's good. You have conditional formatting, it's a lot easier to see, but it's just slow to render. So what I would do is, if I were to have the data bars conditional formatting, I would just remove invoice number from the hierarchy and then use drill through if if your users want to see a breakdown by invoices. Okay, so that's all from me, and I hope you've learned something. Thank you for staying with me. Have a good one. Bye bye.